We so often jump straight to debating policy solutions. But what if we're all trying to solve completely different problems? Today, we're going to dig into the most crucial, and honestly, the most overlooked first step: how a policy problem actually gets defined, and how we figure out who truly matters in that conversation.
Okay, so imagine your city proposes a new urban park. Sounds pretty simple, right? A lovely green space, everyone can enjoy it. Seems like an easy win, a totally straightforward project.
But the second you start to dig in, you realize, oh, it's never just about a park. Suddenly, it's a debate about real estate values, public health, the risk of gentrification, the city's budget. All of these things are tangled together, and that is the central challenge of making public policy. Exactly. Real-world problems just don't come in neat little packages. Policy experts call them noisy, value-laden, and intertwined. Think about a new highway. The debate isn't just about traffic, right? It's about air quality and the communities that might be displaced, and of course, our carbon footprint. Before we can even think about a solution, we have to make sense of this mess.
And that brings us to the first critical step in any policy effort: framing the problem. Now, this is not just some warm-up exercise. How you define the problem, right at the beginning, it literally determines everything that follows: what gets on the agenda, which solutions are even considered, and who gets a seat at the table.
So what exactly is framing? Well, at its core, it's about making a choice. It's about selecting and organizing certain facts and values to make a super complex situation understandable. Framing highlights what you think is causing the problem, how big of a deal it is, and what a better future could look like. Essentially, it's how you turn all that noise into a clear signal.
Now, it is so easy to confuse framing with political spin, but they are fundamentally different things. Spin is all about twisting reality to win an argument, right? Good ethical framing is a disciplined process to build clarity. It's not about winning, it's about creating a shared understanding so that more people can actually join the conversation. Okay, let's make this real. If we go back to our urban park idea, we can apply a few different frames to the exact same project and just watch how the entire conversation shifts. First up, we could use a health frame. Now, if the park is a tool for wellness, our priorities totally change. We'd start focusing on designing jogging paths, safe play areas for kids, maybe some quiet spots for mental relaxation. The goal here is all about reducing stress and promoting physical activity. Or we could swap lenses and use an economic frame. All of a sudden, the park is an engine for growth. The conversation is now about how it can attract tourists, support those little local cafes and shops, and maybe boost property values. The metrics for success are now completely financial. And finally, we could apply an equity frame. Through this lens, the park becomes a matter of social justice. The whole conversation shifts to placing green spaces in historically neglected neighborhoods, making sure there's equal access for everybody. So you see the takeaway? It's one park, but depending on the frame, we have three completely different problems to solve. So once you have a frame, or maybe a few competing frames, the next big question is, who cares? This is where we move from the what of the problem to the who and start identifying the stakeholders.
A stakeholder is basically anyone with skin in the game. They're either directly impacted by the problem or they have the power to influence the outcome. To put it simply, they're the people who will actually show up to complain or to celebrate because they have a real vested interest in what happens.
Now, to do this systematically, policy analysts use a pretty handy tool called stakeholder mapping. It's a really straightforward two-step process. First, you just brainstorm every single person or group you can think of that's connected to the issue. Then, you place them on a simple grid based on two key factors: how much they care and how much power they have. Let's start in that top right corner with the folks who have both high power and high interest. These are your key players. For our park, that's probably the city council that controls the budget and the developers who own the surrounding land. They have the influence and the motivation to make or break this thing, so you have to manage them very, very closely. Now, what about the groups with high interest but low power? These are so often the people who are most affected. The local residents, the little community groups, they care deeply, but they don't have a direct line to the decision makers. A huge part of ethical policy making is figuring out how to empower these voices and bring them into the process. Then you've got this really tricky group: high power but low interest. This could be the local media or maybe the city's transportation authority. The park isn't their #1 priority, but they absolutely have enough influence to shape public opinion or create major roadblocks. The strategy here? Keep them satisfied, keep them informed, so they don't become a problem down the line. And finally, in that last quadrant, low power and low interest, you have the general public. At the start, they might not be paying much attention at all. So the goal here is pretty simple. You just monitor them. A good communication plan could raise their awareness and interest, and maybe even move them into a more active role as the project develops.
So, you've got your map, you know who all the players are. But a map is pretty useless if you don't actually go anywhere with it, right? The next crucial step is to move from just identifying these groups to actually engaging them in a meaningful conversation.
And look, effective engagement isn't just about holding one town hall meeting and calling it a day. It's a real commitment. It's built on principles like inclusivity, making sure those low-power voices are actually heard. It requires transparency about how decisions are being made, and consistency. You can't just talk to people once and then disappear. It's all about creating real feedback loops.
But having a meaningful conversation really depends on asking the right questions. So, what does a good question actually sound like when you're dealing with so many different and often competing perspectives?
Think about a reflective question like this one. Instead of just asking, "So, what do you want?" It asks someone to step into another person's shoes. This is so powerful for two big reasons. It encourages empathy, and it can uncover hidden conflicts and assumptions before they explode.
So why does all this early-stage work matter so much? Because when you define the problem thoughtfully, when you identify everyone with a stake, and when you ask better questions, you end up with policies that are smarter, more resilient, and, this is key, seen as legitimate by the very public they're meant to serve. And let's end on this powerful idea. This whole thing isn't just some technical process. It's an ethical one. The way you frame a problem actually gives power to certain perspectives. It decides whose experiences are considered valid evidence and whose get ignored. That is a huge responsibility.
So I'll leave you with this question. Think about a debate happening in your own community right now. Doesn't matter if it's about housing or schools or traffic. Who is setting the terms of that debate? Who has the power to frame the problem? And whose reality is being treated as the real one?